with Michael Ratner, who's a lawyer, but also primarily focusing on constitutional rights, the rights of people under the Constitution of the United States. And as you know, we have a Bill of Rights, which unfortunately is often ignored and abused in this country. And you obviously have a very strong sense of justice and social justice, and I mean that's why you're doing. A lot of people get into law in the U.S. because they want to make money, but you've chosen a practice of law that is not a money-making practice. It's really about justice and redressing the wrongs that are done to people. And I'm just curious, how did that start for you?
Probably started with immigrant parents from Poland, Russia. So my parents were immigrants, you know, and
were they Jewish immigrants?
They were Jewish immigrants from Europe,
yeah.
and
so they were used to pogroms and
quite used to it. So there was always that idea of being a minority, and then the schools I went to, I think I was the only child of an immigrant parent who spoke with a very heavy accent, and so there was some of that. But then, certainly after the war in 1945 to 50, and I was probably 3 or 4 years old, I remember going to resettle refugees. Was a big part of what my father and mother did as their helpful thing, and give affidavits to get people out of Europe and things like that. And then the other thing obviously that was key was I went to college and then to law school at the time of the Vietnam War, the civil rights movement, and the time when really the move for changing the social structure of this country was at its height, and it actually succeeded in a certain level. I mean, when I went to law school, there were 10 women, and now Columbia Law School is 50% women. There were 9 people of color, and now it's 20%.
فلما كان في جامعة كولومبيا في فقط يعني 10% من النساء والآن 50%.
And so we really changed that period, and you know, I got beaten over the head by cops then.
يعني ضربوا الشرطة بهذه التغييرات.
So it was really a period that my son is very envious of me. He says, you know, Daddy, you had all these things you were able to do in the late 60s and 70s, and what kind of world are you leaving me now? You know, and I think that's a serious problem. I mean, to be honest,
it is sad, you know, that we've lost that spirit of really the struggle. In essence, I mean, in Islam, you know, we actually call that jihad, which is the struggle, and it's a very abused term now. But that real meaning is that it's a struggle for the establishment of social justice. And
that's one of the things I really learned about Islam that I didn't know before. I mean, who knew from anything really before 9/11 in this country? No one knew we had 4 million Muslims living here, or whatever the number is. But when I talked to some of my clients or their families, really, who were even in Guantanamo.
So how many Muslim clients do you have? I'm sorry, what did you learn about Islam?
Well, what was interesting is that, you know, like young people in this country go to their home countries, whether it's Israel to do work in a kibbutz or something, that a lot of these young men had nothing to do, obviously, with the Taliban or terrorism or anything. They went actually as a sort of spiritual and struggle reawakening to get in touch with their Muslim roots. And the idea that the idea of getting anywhere in America, convincing people that, oh, if they were anywhere near Afghanistan or Pakistan, they were obviously terrorists. It's just hard to do, but it really makes sense, but people aren't willing to translate the experience of, let's say, Jewish people going every year on, you know, 10,000 of them to Israel. And, you know, when you see the story of one of my clients, his name Mohsen Beg. Mohsen Beg is a young man from the UK, United Kingdom, and his father is here, actually. His father's leaving today, unfortunately, Azmet Beg. And he's been in Guantanamo for 2.5 years.
2.5 years.
And when you hear his father tell the story of what happened, he was arrested in Pakistan eventually, in his house with a young child and his wife there. And his father gives this beautiful thing about his son was more Muslim, and not more Muslim, but obeyed the tenets of the religion than he did. He prayed, his father never prayed. And he said when he was a young man, his father had put him in the real estate business for a little while in England, but he wanted to go and do some social good in Afghanistan in this case. And he got there and he had trouble getting anything to do with the Taliban government or anything, so he went off and he decided to put little water plants, little water pumps in different poor villages in Afghanistan, because he felt Afghanistan was almost the poorest country in the world, and the people loved him for it. And then, of course, when the bomb started, he just fled to Pakistan, and eventually the U.S.
got arrested and taken to Guantanamo. He's a British citizen.
Right, and nothing. I mean, we can't move an inch on the guy. They've never told him what he's charged with. But here's a man who you know, people would in this country moon, he's Muslim, he was in Afghanistan, throw the key
Wrong
away.
place, wrong time.
But in fact, as his father said, he had long discussions with him about what he called creating society, and wanted a society where old people could do something good and young people, and he was going to set up schools, and he understood his wife was going to teach the women's side, and
He's
he was
an
going to teach the
idealist,
men's
yeah.
side. Right, and that's a story that is true, I think, but that's selling that story in America about, and that's who a lot of those people are in Guantanamo.
Well, I mean, that's the whole point of having the right, you know, habeas corpus, to actually, you know, to see what you're being charged with, have representation. It's all to prevent these abuses. I mean, that's why we created this system, or those before us
That's
created
why,
it, because there were so many abuses of government. And how many Muslim people are you representing right now?
probably our office, what happened is that we started out with a very small core of people. We took the first case, which at that point was January 2002, and we were out there on a limb. I mean, this was, I was actually at the World Trade Center when it happened. I was jogging near it. And people were here obviously devastated for months. And
yeah, it was shocked. People were
yeah,
shocked.
and still are. And the whole southern part of Manhattan was like a funeral. I mean, you know, so we were, at that point, people weren't ready to do much defense of anybody, although right after 9/11 there were a huge number of Muslim non-citizens
detained.
And we started, because we have a woman here who speaks Arabic, and she went immediately into the prisons, and we started to work with people who were detained right away, but even that was not popular at that time in this country.
So you were doing something, I mean, right away.
Right.
You just felt that it was important that...
Within a week, because we were getting calls from husbands, or from wives, from children saying, where's my father, where's my husband? And our government was just, the Bush administration was just circling around telling them, oh, he's been picked up, he's in the prison in New York, but in fact he was in the prison in Passaic, New Jersey. So they were giving people the runaround, and they were treating these people who were nothing but the lowest level immigration violators. Like, you know, the guy had overstayed his visa for 30 days, or before he went back to Pakistan, he was working in a gas station for 2 weeks. And these are the people who were picked up because either their girlfriend was mad at them, or their landlord, or, you know, they just got stopped arbitrarily because they looked Muslim or Arabic.
Right.
And these were the people who were put in, and they were treated as terrorists. They were shackled, you know, hands, feet, legs, had the heck beaten out of them in a lot of cases.
Seriously?
Oh, yeah, yeah. In fact, we actually filed a lawsuit.
And a lot of that's anger, obviously. It
was anger over 9/11. The guards said, oh, Muslim, I'm going to push
yeah,
your
you're all
head
in it
against the
together,
wall.
yeah. And it's part of our problem.
And that's what happened in the prisons.
Yeah.
And we filed a lawsuit, and then about maybe a year later, the Inspector General, who's like an overseer of looking at what happens, came out with a report confirming everything that happened. They were treated as terrorists, and they shouldn't have been.
So you saw this coming in essence.
Right. We saw that coming. And then in November of 2001, President Bush issues what's called Military Order Number 1. And that was, I remember having a reaction in this room with my office. We were stunned. Here, all of a sudden, it's 2 months after 9/11, and he's essentially taking over the country from a military standpoint.
We've been jointly working on
With Michael on
Guantanamo
Guantanamo?
issues for 2.5 years. Abu Ghraib, there were photographs, and that was what woke the rest of the world up.
Right.
It took that. In Guantanamo...
Did you read this whole thing?
Yes.
Can I ask you, I mean, what was your feeling about it in reading it?
They, I know them all. They're truthful, decent, principled, interesting young men who've been to hell and back. They've experienced a world that we can not even imagine. And despite coming back traumatized, they sat down for 2 months and tried to set down for the rest of the world what their experience had been, which is horrifying. Because there were no photographs, they worked with an illustrator to show what otherwise no one would believe. I'm sure if there'd not been photographs from Abu Ghraib, no one would believe that what the detainees experienced had happened. That's forcible shaving of hair and beard for non-cooperation in interrogation in Guantanamo. That's if you were reluctant to cooperate with your interrogators. It's the necessity for the world to see, isn't it?
I think so, yeah.
To believe. That's short shackling where the detainees
They can't move.
trapped like that hour after hour after hour, with the air conditioning turned up to freezing as a preliminary to interrogation, and sometimes day after day for a week at a time. That's medical treatment. That's detainees told they were to have an injection. When they asked what it was, they were not told. They objected and forcibly detained and pinned down. Grotesque practices. That's the testimony of three who've emerged, but there are hundreds, more than 500 still there.
You know, what's compelled you to do this?
Well, it's our privilege, wouldn't you say, to have been in a position as lawyers where we think we are a tool that can do something. The whole of the law has been skewed. All of our rights, so-called, in England and America have been distorted to make sure that these young men can't win. Yeah. The whole of the context in which the detainees are fighting for their rights is one in which they're never meant to win, and therefore it isn't really a legal issue at all. It's a political issue. But if lawyers can in any way make use of the law that exists to try to achieve a balance, then that's their job to do it.
If you had one thing you wanted to say to the Muslim world, the Arab world, what would that be right now?
I have had the experience for about 7 years in England of representing and coming to know well people and their families who are Muslims and who are devout Muslims and who have been branded as Islamic fundamentalists, as if that was an appropriate term of abuse, which it indeed is offensive. And I've come to know people as tolerant, intelligent, funny, perceptive, broad-minded, and that has been a life experience that I value above any other. But that's a rare privilege, and for many of the population of England and America, that is not a relationship or a privilege they're going to have.
Right.
And there has to be a way of bringing home to the West what an atrocious pattern of behaviour it is involved in.
Right.
What a collision course of monstrous proportions that it has somehow implemented without any understanding or ability to see where it's going.
Thank you very much for
I'm
sharing that
sorry.
with us.
I think it was him. I think it was him. He's tall, yeah, kind of dapper looking guy, yeah.
Hey, Saman, how you doing?
How you doing?
Good to see you.
Good to see you. How you doing? Yeah, you're Saudi, huh?
So how's New York?
Good, excellent. I told him
We're here.
yeah, we got the eternal flame here.
Yeah, interesting. Right there.
Did you? This was between the World Trade Center buildings, and they managed to pull this out of the rubble afterwards, and they put it up here, erected it. What's left of it anyway in the eternal flame.
It's almost like an earth blowing up. I mean, it's been an interesting image.
It's amazing to me when you see those pictures of that day that actually something survived that was so close to the buildings, because you just get the
That was in the middle.
Yeah.
On the ground.
On the ground.
Oh,
You get the
okay.
impression that anything around there would just be obliterated. So it's quite amazing they managed to pull something out.
Unbelievable. Our trip has been brilliant.
Really?
we were talking about it on where to here. It's just been a paradigm shift after another paradigm shift after another paradigm
In terms
shift.
of?
Just for Arab viewership, what they're going to see, a side of America that a lot of them are unaware of. You know, the fact that part of the goal of this program is that America's not a monolithic entity, and the Arab world's not a monolithic entity. And
Saudi Arabia's not a monolithic entity.
Exactly.
NBC's not a monolithic
And so we've done too little, especially media people in general, but all of us, we've done too little to really drive that home.
We were talking about that before, about the responsibility that we all have as journalists to get the message out. And I think that's what you're doing here, and that's what we were trying to do in Saudi.
I mean, that's exactly what we were trying to do. I mean, it's a lot of people have one view. I mean, Ahmed talked about it when we were in Saudi, that there's one way hatred. And that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to say, listen, I mean, there are people here who are supporting your cause so much, sometimes even better than the people that are oppressed themselves. And you cannot isolate these people by having one-way hatred and having one look at at the U.S. as one evil entity. There's I think there's a lot that needs to be be done, even from not only from we're doing our part, but I think the media from the two sides should do more to bring these point of views together, because they're far now.
Every door-to-door salesman, his desire is to get into the house.
Yeah.
That's the hardest part. The television, you're already in. You're the stranger in the house.
Yeah.
We have a lot of negativity on both sides of the map. We've got this kind of Fox News attitude about the Muslims, the Arab, and then we have certain elements in the Middle East that are broadcasting about the West. And we just spent about an hour and a half with Michael Ratner, who's working with the Guantanamo Bay issues, and met Gareth Pierce from England, she's been working 2 years of her life to try to deal with the fact that we've got people in that camp that are unrepresented, and many of them, they don't even know what they're doing.
It looks like Yasser Hamdi may be released soon. When we were in Saudi in November last year, we went visited his family, talked with his father. He showed us some of the letters, and it was really a nice story.
Actually, one of the things
I'm really encouraged to hear this.
I hope he's out. One of the things we learned, and it goes back to your point, which is why people are not listening. I think a lot of it is happening because they're so emotional. I mean, people are so emotionally charged that they shut down. It goes back to the point where you're saying they don't want to listen to certain things because it interferes with their emotions. They want to feel angry. They want to feel upset. It's like, I think a lot of it, we saw it here right after September 11, where nobody wanted to hear anything.
Sure.
It just shut down its emotions, and it's we're human. I mean, that's.
And you were saying, I remember you saying when we were talking in Jeddah that the responsibility is to sort of calm people down, to explain it, bring the understanding, but to calm them down. Do you think from what you've been hearing from people here, you're able to do that?
I think, our objective is actually to bring the clear picture that there are two sides in America. There are the good side, people who are objective, people who are trying to help, people who are looking for justice, and there is another side that is shut down and they have their own agenda.
There's a lot of shades of gray. No, I would, absolutely.
And the same thing is on the other side as well. I mean, and that's the point we're trying to get across, is that make up your own mind, look at the facts, be logical about it, be objective. Again, going back, and I need the two worlds to empathize with each other. Don't judge people, empathize with others because they have problems. Try to live their problems.
Yeah, I remember you talking about
Robert McNamara's that was in the Fog of War.
Yeah.
His
I'm
first
still
lesson,
waiting to see that.
Empathize with your enemies. And a lot of, they're not enemies. That's part of the problem. Yeah, that we've got.
And there's a perception built about that.
People that are being bombed, you can say you're trying to do them a favor, but that's not how they're going to feel about it.
Americans aren't bombing Saudi.
Well, but don't forget, that first they're Muslims. The Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that the Muslims are like one body. Any part that's hurt, the whole body feels it. So that's the biggest danger that our country, I'm an
American.
American.
I guess that's part of the understanding that we need to bring in. The concept of what we're trying to tell is that concept that people in Saudi feel what's happening in Iraq. They feel what's happening.
Exactly.
In other places
It's them. They feel it.
That.
Yeah. And actually, there are several Saudi tribes that have relatives in Kuwait and Iraq from amongst the Iraqis, especially in the southern part.
Yeah. This is your first time back since September 11th.
And they were worried,
that's
what.
I think what changed is the attitudes. I mean, there's a proverb in Arabic that I love. It says, my grandmother used to say it all the time. اللي تلدغ من الحية يخاف من الحبل. Basically, what it means, if you're bitten by a snake, you will be afraid of a rope.
Okay.
And that's really, I mean,
Yeah.
it's true. I mean, you have to have that tension is there, and you can't deny that the tension is not there. It is there, and we see it. But I mean, I haven't faced any prejudice or any attitude, negative attitude.
On the
so
contrary,
far
we were
it's been-
expecting to find something. I mean, we didn't want to come at the beginning. You know, it's like when
we
I
had to
said,
convince
yeah,
them.
he said, let's go to the US.
Yeah.
He said, we have the whole world. Why did you pick the US? And I was really afraid, that we come here and we start getting an attitude and we're not treated properly, and so that was the main concern. And when we came, I mean, it was so far it's been okay. I hope the whole trip ends up like this. I mean,
Well, I mean, our most, part of our goal has been to humanize. I want to see the Muslims and the Arabs humanized. They're individuals and they're humans. We had a beautiful Jewish lady who said, I said, do you have anything to say to the Arab world? She said, I don't judge any of you as a group. I'll judge you as you behave as an individual.
ماذا قدمت
ليش قدمت؟ هذه كلمة
يعني أنت ماذا قدمت؟ مثل لما هذا الرجل سأل النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم العربي عن الساعة، وبعد ما صلى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال أين السائل؟ قال ماذا أعددت لها؟ ماذا أعددت لها؟ يعني سبحان الله أعاد السؤال على نفسه. المهم ليس متى الساعة، المهم هل أنت مستعد للساعة؟ نعم، فهذا هو السؤال. يعني ليس هؤلاء من هم وهكذا. هل أنت تفعل مثلهم في شغلك؟ يعني هل أنت ضحيت بنفسك؟ هل تركت وظيفة راقية لتشتغل مثل هؤلاء الذين رأينا في فيلادلفيا؟ والله كلهم، أنا أؤكد لكم لو هذا أنور مهيمن أراد أن يتوظف في مكان جميل ويعيش معيشة طيبة لا استطاع، أنا أؤكد لك. ولكن هذا الرجل اختار أن يرجع إلى أفقر منطقة في فيلادلفيا. لماذا؟ لأنه يريد أن يرقى هؤلاء، أن يساعدهم.
أنا ما سوي كذا كان.
نعم. والله هذا اللوم والشتم وهذه الأشياء علينا أن نعمل. اعملوا.